So welcome everybody to Pathwork Guide Lecture 206. It was originally channeled on December 15th, 1972. And the title of this lecture is Desire, Creative or Destructive. And you can find these lectures at pathwork.org, and there's a total of 258, I believe, and yeah, there's you can find more recordings on my YouTube channel. So if you want to explore a little more, I'm just kind of inviting people on these recordings to kind of orient themselves a little bit, because we kind of just jump in because people on this class have been with me and doing this for a long time. And so now we have them posted. It probably would be good to just kind of do a little intro here. So thanks for. So the lecture, Desire, Creative or Destructive. And does anybody want to get a chance to, like open with, your general impressions if you had a chance to look at it, or anything you want to say before we start reading? And
Yeah, I want to say that I appreciate this concept that was new to me some time ago. I was really exploring a lot of Buddhism and Zen kind of approach earlier in my self-exploration, and I found that to be quite difficult of a thing to apply to life, because then I felt like I didn't want to be engaged or wouldn't be engaged, and there was a lot of fear of letting go. And I think this helped to kind of tie that together with how to actually be engaged in the world while not being attached, and that it's not a total complete surrender, although that may be one of the steps, but it seems like then there's a re-engagement. So that, I think, is just really helpful with this lecture. I think it breaks that down. So yeah, that's all I wanted to add.
okay, great. Thanks, Jacob.
So my take on it when I read the title is desire, creative or destructive, is that in every day we have the choice of whether we want to create constructively or destructively. Like giving an example at work. So, if I'm at work and there's a coworker and I don't know, maybe she's having a bad day and she said something to me that triggered me and I didn't like it. Like in that moment, when I realize I have a choice here, I have a desire. I can either be destructive and come back at her in a defensive way, and we could, just really create a lot of negative, or I could be creative and just say, okay, let me just take a breath, let me let it go. My desire would be to be more in union with her than in separation with her. So that's kind of how I look at the desire to create.
That difference. Interesting. Yeah, I mean, I think, I think it's kind of embedded in that, and it is almost like a double entendre. I think the lecture is interesting. So it covers like a lot of very sophisticated, it's one of those things where, the guide is always talking about the splits that we have, right? And it's like there's a divinity and a distortion on both sides of things. And to pay to, kind of begin to, again, tune into not so much, the story so much, but the energy behind the story, or the, the motive, or, being sort of going a level deeper. But he covers so much in this lecture, and so much of it feels to me to be sort of almost an overview of how to work with our whole, longing to be in life, and to, I mean, our struggles sometimes when our life isn't, what we want it to be, and and there's a lot of, sort of manifestation kinds of thinking, right? That I think people get confused in. And I think this helps also, I think it helps when we feel really like, we're in a battle with somebody else. I don't know. I was just amazed at how many levels this lecture covered. So I'm going to stop there and we can just start reading the lecture. Does anybody else want to?
Not yet.
Okay, so we'll start with it. So greetings and blessings for all of you, my dearest friends. In order to finally discover your divine center, it is necessary to go through all the layers that separate you from it. The misconceptions, false images, negativities, illusions, pretenses, defenses, unexperienced and therefore unassimilated feelings and confused thoughts are one thick crust. This crust is the most difficult part to penetrate in the voyage to your innermost core. It contains many aspects that you have to learn to recognize, approach, and accept in the right way. Once you have penetrated all the layers, you will gradually have to dissolve and assimilate the accumulated blocks. When you have learned the right approach to these aspects of yourself, which you would rather not know, then you will come upon other levels of your being that still separate you from your innermost divinity. To put it differently, other tasks are waiting for you on your path to total self-awareness, which is the absolute prerequisite to unification with the central divine core. So that's kind of a vague general, a lot of things, but everything I hear him saying, I totally agree, but it's like that there's this whole journey, that he's recapitulating a little bit there, right? That's just saying, we have a lot of this, that, awareness and, becoming, willing to face and feel and look at and experience and explore, right? This is a kind of a path of self-knowledge. And in a way, in order to go on that journey to face and explore ourselves, we have to have acceptance. We have to have self-acceptance. And then there's this kind of self-acceptance in the right and wrong way. He has another lecture about that, right? So one such task is to achieve clear perception and connection with the soul movements. And you can also call them the energy streamings of your feelings and attitudes, the positive as well as the negative ones. So, it's like he's kind of digressing, and he's not talking exactly about desire here yet, but he's saying, that it is very powerful when we can begin to make this awareness of the soul movements inside of us. And we can begin to experience the energy streamings of our feelings and our attitudes, positive as well as negative. So would most people say here that they have some sense of that perception? See some heads nodding.
Yes.
So yeah, and I don't know, for me it was really important to kind of like shift out of my mental story and notice, and so that was a lot of what Pathwork brought me to, like even in the beginning where I was just encouraged to express all my feelings, right, in the movement of allowing them to come out, in this kind of safe space and letting them be all that they were. I could feel in my body the streamings, and stuff. And all of a sudden it kind of was beyond the story. It was just, like these big feelings that were moving through me in these currents. And, and maybe it was even a sad feeling, but it didn't feel exactly sad. It felt like a current, moving through me. And somehow the movement, even though it was sad, felt good, so I think there's a lot of value in our journey and in our path and the fact that the path work really does, bring us into awareness of that aspect of our inner experience. It says every attitude, every expression, every feeling creates an energy movement in your system, a specific soul movement. We will discuss the energy movement in this lecture of wanting, wishing, and desiring. Its meaning, its significance in the total expression of the human personality, and in the importance of the self-creating process. Self-awareness, whether it concerns awareness of inner problems, confusions, one's faults and negativities, or the awakening of the ever-present ongoing divine voice inside of you. Self-awareness requires the art of focusing within. You must also practice focusing to detect the presence of those soul movements, even to know what you really feel and think at any given moment, and which soul movements those feelings and thoughts create. Such focusing implies, of course, some ability to concentrate, but this is not too hard to learn. Every now moment is an expression within you and creates a specific soul movement. Observe these movements. Do you feel a tightness? Is the movement blocked and stopped completely because of the tightness? Or is it absent in its expression? Is it hard-edged, pointed, disharmonious, and raw? Or is it smooth, enlivening, soft flow? When you feel good, happy, open, and alive, the soul movements are very smooth and soft. Yet in this very softness lies an enormous strength. When the movement is stopped, you feel dead. When the movement is hurtful, raw, edgy, or pointed, you feel anxious, upset, apprehensive. Every soul movement is the result of specific feelings, thoughts, and attitudes. And you must focus your attention on them too. Let me just pause there. Any comments before we move into the soul movement of wanting, wishing, or desiring? To me, it's just the key of anytime we're doing our work, that basically, we usually start with an event that triggers us, and then that triggers the story inside of us about what the meaning of the event is. And if we just stay cycling at that level and we don't drop down and kind of just connect, let go of the story and just connect with the soul movements, then, I think we kind of get hooked and lost and trapped in, sort of the tiny perspective of the pain body. And so if we can drop into the soul movements, there's a kind of a larger observing possibility, I think, that happens. And also, the soul movements are also in the present moment now, and that's where guidance comes in, like larger perspective might, just kind of dawn on us as we are present to ourselves in the moment. It's where the vibrational information, of what's really alive in us exists. And so it's to me a very important part of the work that we do. So he says, let us now deal with the soul movements of wanting, wishing, or desiring. Everything that exists in human expression can harmonize with the universal forces and creative laws. Your soul movements can be healthy and therefore creative and thus further creation, or they can be distorted, sick, life-defeating, and thus cause further destruction. Desire in itself is never either right or wrong, good or bad, desirable or undesirable. And like Jane said, we can desire the undesirable, or we can desire the desirable, right? But also sometimes there's even subtler ways that desire can be, consciously, maybe in distortion in some ways. So when So he says we cannot always say that having a desire is a hindrance to spirituality. Again, sort of the Eastern philosophy looks at this that way, on desirelessness as a necessary state. But the guide says this is only partly true. It is untrue in the sense that if desire is absent, it is impossible to create. You create by visualizing a new state of being. To do so, the desire must exist. How you express this desire will determine the outcome. If the desire is too strong, too tight, if it evolves out of a misconception that implies any kind of a must, the desire is no longer a desire, but a demand, a threat, a forcing current that says, I must have my way or else I will perish, will suffer unfairly and unbearably, will be unfairly treated. It's a kind of control drama that, makes us this, victim that, then we're trying to force others to, like comply in some way. Or sometimes life, sometimes I even am throwing a tantrum like that with God, right? Or the conditions of life. But does that make sense? It's like there's this very clear difference between a healthy desire and the work of the positive creative aspect of desire, and what sometimes happens is that in the defense we go into the forcing current and into the demand. And again, it's based on fear, it's based on pride, it's based on self-will, right? The voice indicates a threat containing the message that if life does not yield the demanded result, then life is bad and unfair, and which you proceed to prove, right, by the dismal result that you're about to create. I love the guy as he describes this. It's quite brilliant, right? We can all recognize it in ourselves. It's good we can laugh at it. So positive real desire is a prerequisite to the self-creating process. For example, if you do not want a new and more loving state of being, you will have no motivation to attain it, no incentive to overcome the often apparently insurmountable resistance, not even a visualized possibility of such a state. To create a new state of personality, soul movements must flow forth. Like the wind, they carry the creative seed. Desire is the blueprint we act upon. To distinguish between the creative and the destructive desire occurrence, it is important to understand what I mentioned before, whether the desire flows without a must, or whether it contains the forcing current, can be easily ascertained in yourself and even in others. As it is with many other spiritual verities, the concept of desire contains an apparent paradox. The right kind of desire must become so relaxed that it does not have to be fulfilled. So see if you can, take that in, right? For people that have, connection with their will or their will types, it's like, this is a kind of a big statement, right? So, and maybe for everybody, right? That, can you imagine, that in whatever it is that you desire in life, and it may be, a deep, positive, good desire to find your rightful place. Maybe you really are suffering and, where you are in life right now, and you just want to come out and give your gift. I remember a long time, sitting in a kind of state of, longing and desire to, birth forth this mission of the Earth Walk retreat. And, and it seemed like, for the longest time, the answer, there was nothing that kind of moved in the way that I was hoping for. And, when I look back, I think there was some of this wrong kind of desire in different ways, right? And some kind of negative creation in that. But, a lot of times life takes us, to me, it's kind of the feminine part of the journey into the descent, and in the place where, we have to be patient. It's like the feminine journey is, about, sorting seeds and, spinning straw into gold, and, these tedious long-term, forever tasks, right? That, and waiting patiently. And I think it's a part of the journey as well. And so, there's a kind of right kind of desire that doesn't abandon itself, that doesn't go into hopelessness, that doesn't go into, feeling, frustration and fruitlessness, but sort of just keeps holding on to the inner truth, of that desire without demand, and patience waiting for it in some way. And like in the last lecture that we were reading, it has to also be with the right kind of effort, because it can't just be wishful thinking that somehow it just kind of comes magically out of the blue, right? So we have to do the task of sorting the seeds, of continuing to survive, of doing our work in the world, even if it isn't the real work that we were hoping to do all along, that kind of thing. So,
Yeah, and Darlene, it's kind of reminding me of, the lecture where being versus appearance. Sometimes our desires are to look a certain way,
right.
and instead of just being with the desire, and just, the demand is that, oh, gotta have it because I'm not going to look a certain way.
Exactly. Yeah. And to go below that mask, because those levels of desire, yeah, it's just part of that defense, and it's not really coming for the real self. So it's always going to be, under threat, and unhappy, and unsatisfied in a way. And so desire often, is like sort of the opposite of that, is dissatisfaction, like, or like if we desire something that we don't have, then we're forever dissatisfied, right?
Yeah.
And that's another Buddhist concept too, right? Dukkha, dissatisfaction, it's like that it lives in the soul, that's not it, I want something else. So we're, really always exploring, this current in us. It's very important, the guide is saying, and so it's good to take some time and try to sort it through here. So he's saying desire is the blueprint we act upon. And he says, whether desire flows without a must, or whether it contains the forcing current. Okay, I read that part. Yeah, again. So if you can strongly desire without a trace of a must, but with an attitude of, I can live without my wish being fulfilled. I can go through the pain of not having it and not be annihilated, defeated, or unhappy. Then the power of such a desire is truly limitless. Can you sense into that? It's like when we can align and hold to a desire, right, without that must in there, knowing that we can we can withstand the lack of the desire. I remember one time, even when we were working with some of the nonviolent communication, there was a handout that we were doing, sort of on the, so there's unmet needs, right? We have desires to meet our needs, and in life there are unmet needs. And if we can remember, that there's a goodness in having even an unmet need, right? That if we just see it as the lack, and don't see sort of the flip side of the coin of, like, well, isn't it a blessing that we're here, and are alive to have an unmet need, and the possibility that need could be fulfilled, or that unmet need is here to teach us something or whatever, it's like we can shift our, place in working with it. There's this, difficulty because, it really feels like, how can we not be annihilated, defeated, and unhappy when we can't sort of have what we deeply desire, right? How can we come into a state in which we want and consider what we want and consider desirable, we can also readily give up? How can you deeply long for something and yet accept the pain of its unfulfillment? These are very deep, weighty, core questions, I feel. It's like that's kind of at the bottom of so much as, our willingness to accept pain on this earth plane in some way, and how to hold pain when we're in pain, right? How to hold ourselves when we're in pain. But as he says, this seems a tall order, and all of evolution of the human soul, is actually moving toward that state, to be allowing pain to be pain, to being allowing to surrender, and still stay aligned in our longing, aligned in our desire, aligned in our movement towards God, right? And there's a way that it's kind of where we can see, he says, the need for it is evident on the outermost level, that crust in which all of the negativities reside. One of the main reasons for the existence of this crust is the refutation of pain. Evil resists what is, and thus splits itself off from itself, forever fragmenting consciousness into smaller or more limited particles. That makes so much sense to me. It's like, I see it in myself all the time, like that it's what, like my heat pump broke down, it's like, that can't be, right? We resist what is, right? And we, I think there is something to the serenity prayer that, says, well, grant me the courage to change the things that can be changed, right? But that doesn't really require resisting what is either, right? So there's this kind of automatic soul current in our know that resists what is. And the minute we do that, it's like, this shouldn't be, this is not, and so then we are now split from, the totality, right? It creates all of this fragmentation. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, it's almost, I'm thinking to myself, if this is so unconscious, it's almost like, I wonder if I really sat quiet and thought, like, have I really ever desired something, or has it always been like the desire unconsciously? I believe that it's not going to happen, so therefore I kind of almost sabotage what it is that I actually desire, because I don't think that I don't know, like the pain of not getting it, it's like I almost create that anyway.
Right, exactly. And that was partly also in that lecture before on, this pessimism, the superstition of pessimism, like it's too painful to want something and then not get it, so let's just stay negative and not believe it'll ever be possible.
Doesn't matter.
Right. So exactly. And so, there is a way that we can deny our desire again, and that also, disrupts the creative process, right? Because it is what's required to, move and create and be part of that evolutionary transformation. So again, like he says evil resists what is, like I find it interesting because what in me resists what is like the perfectionist, the idealized self, the part of me that the guide calls the um, superimposed conscience, that says it shouldn't be this way, right? So it shouldn't be this way is right there, right? A splitting of reality, right? A rejection, a resistance to what is. And so, I think it's interesting because I see in more places than one, if you look at how the guide uses interchangeably things like evil or the, Luciferic, consciousness, or, all of this, you can see that he's referring basically to this idealized self-image part of us, right? This part that starts splitting things off. But you're right, Jane, it's because we're afraid. It's because, we can't, the pain, and we're running from just cleanly, smoothly feeling and letting the pain flow, because we have interpretation of the pain that says we're bad, somebody's bad, something's wrong, right? And that creates all of this jaggedy, soul currents that make the pain hard pain rather than just the smooth flowing soft pain that is probably, the truth of what we need to feel. So it's a lot about exploring this relationship that we have with the pain and the splitting away, from what is. And how can we embrace it? How can we welcome it? How can we remember to accept it? And you're right, we unconsciously immediately split off from it. But, when we can get aware of that, then we can make a different choice. And we may not even be able to act, find that, do that, but we can in our heart say, oh, I see I'm splitting off. Help me, God. I know I need to, accept and be with what is, right?
And it's almost like in the beginning, you were talking about that it could be subtle, that it could be so subtle, like the pain doesn't have to be like a blown out pain. It could be a very subtle, like, oh, wow, I feel rejected. Like, is that real? Am I really being rejected? Like, what is my desire to believe I'm being rejected, or maybe
Right,
I'm
right,
not
right,
being rejected,
right. Where am
right?
I recreating my images, right?
Right.
Where am I, and so, right,
Yeah.
it's like a lot of this lecture is really basically about self-responsibility. And I think as we go further, he gets into that even more. So let's go ahead and see where it goes from
Yeah,
here.
this lecture feels alive for me.
Yeah, it's a good one. Yeah, I like it myself too. Um, so, he's saying that we fragment, into smaller or more limited particles. And he says they can all come together again through the great act of acceptance or non-resistance in the right way. And again, it's not just submission or, there's this kind of subtle way that we have to skin the cat or find the eye of the needle, or, it's like there's a distortion in divinity on each side and we have to unravel it. So he says such an act requires a methodical path with help at every step of the way, for it's easy to veer off into distortion and misconceptions of truth. If you are frightened of pain, together with its derivatives, such as frustration, disappointment, rejection, and believe that you must not experience these feelings, then you will have an overly strong desire to have no pain, and you will deny the pain. A must current is set up in you that says, this I must have, no pain. This I must not have, pain. Any such demand is a creative block. So it hinders the very fulfillment you insist upon most. The tightness, the saying no to something, whatever it is in the universe, the false, cramped no creates a harsh, tight soul movement, a movement that is full of sharp cutting edges, which are pointed and hurtful. Both wanting and not wanting can be harmonious and soft or disharmonious and pointed. So again, when we have this forcing current, it creates an energetic thing that adds to the pain, like it's like where I think we get into the hard pain, that and judgment create hard pain. So it would be a mistake to interpret acceptance of all feelings and experiences to mean that you should not refute certain experiences or actions that people commit against you. I wish to make this clear. For instance, if you insist on not having any pain, you will be so disconnected and tense that you will not even recognize, let alone deal with others' negativity and see when their machinations could abuse you. The very pain that this causes makes you blind to it, therefore you react blindly. You can neither feel the true pain nor assert yourself. Conversely, if you do not fear pain, you can stand up for yourself and will not allow others to be deceitful, destructive, dishonest, and abusive in their subterfuges and games. So does that make sense? Like, can you put that together in your own experience? Like where you have difficulty standing up for yourself, can you check in and see, is there some way where I'm fearing a pain, or I'm trying to avoid a pain, and at the same time stand up for myself, right? It's like, and then he's saying it probably won't work so well with both tied together. A lot of times, we have the universe present us a kind of damned if we do, damned if we don't apparent choice in the outside world, right? And I think sometimes, those are like tests or initiatory kinds of periods in our lives, because it's kind of like the puzzle of, okay, so, it's like, is there some other way, or maybe sometimes I just need to, choose the lesser of two evils, and that's, the best that can be done. But usually when there is like that, the guide says we're in the land of an image, right? When we find ourselves, no matter which side of the coin, it's like it's not, we have some sacrifice to make that's unacceptable. And he's saying it's probably true, it's not necessary. There's some, mental way that you're looking at the thing that is requiring that. And so, to begin to explore what the image is, and see, because it's usually someplace where also, we fear a pain, we fear a death, we fear, oh, if I have to experience that, I won't be able to stand it, right? And this goes back to him saying, if we can have the courage to feel that whatever pain might be the consequence, then we're unstoppable. But where we, are held by our fear of some consequence that creates pain, whether physical or real or, emotional, or, then we, are kind of held hostage.
Darlene,
And go
oh,
ahead.
sorry, I
Yeah.
didn't mean to interrupt.
No, you're good. Come in.
I've been going through A Course in Miracles, and something that stood out to me, I wrote it out, that is very much in line with what the guide is describing here. And the quote is, "When you're afraid of anything, you are acknowledging its power to hurt you." And that was said so simply, and it just kind of dawned on me, the reality of that statement is that fear equals some kind of underlying acknowledgement that this thing could hurt me. And I think if you dig deep enough, as you were just describing, to see what that hurt could actually be, you could see the fallacy in most of the things that you're afraid of, if you're just to really, really dig. Or you might find that there might be a hurt, might be disappointment. And if you're willing to stand up to it and say, I can bear that too, or I can live through that as well, then, like you're suggesting, the unstoppable, open, flowing, willing kind of mentality comes through.
Exactly. Yeah. Good. Yeah. and there's there is this thing that sometimes, like you said, there is real pain in this world, right? There's a way in which, like, if we can begin to face the real natural pain, times of grief, without judgment, without the going into the images and the kind of blame, putting it outside of ourselves or defense and all of that, when we're trying to avoid pain, but we can just embrace the pain. And one of the things that I found, whether it's physical or emotional pain, if I can be present to it in my own experience compassionately, right? The kind of pain that is impossible to be with is when we're judging ourselves. So whatever, we've done, even if it's our fault, or even if it's just the world's fault, or even if it's just, the simple twist of fate, or whatever it is, that we don't understand, but is, brought us to a situation of distress or loss, or, part of the plan we hadn't planned on, we didn't want to create, but here we are, then I think we can, like, hold ourselves in that and give ourselves courage and give ourselves heart, to carry on, knowing somehow that, yeah, this is a part of the soul's, mountain or desert that it's, having to pass through in this lifetime. And it's a challenge, and but as the guide says, we have everything we need, to experience whatever life is going to bring us. And I think that's in this lecture too. So when we can, and again, we can know that spiritually, it can resonate, but then all of the parts of us that are still in the darkness and don't know it, parts that are in fear, they're going to come up, they're going to live through us, they're going to act out inside of us and inside of our lives. So it's like we have to be both. We're human and divine. We're the pain bodies, and we're the conscious awareness and compassion that can hold and transform them.
In this, like, going back to that, so what the guide is saying, that if you're blind to the pain, right, like the very pain that causes the very pain that this causes makes you blind to it, therefore you react blindly. So it's like, if you're blind, the guy is saying, like, you don't even know that you're feeling, you don't even know that there's pain there. So how does that relate to fearing pain if you're not even aware that you are in pain? Am I making that? Sounds like a maze of the mind, but
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, how I'm reading it, it's like, it's like he says, makes you blind. I think, how I feel it is like I'm closing my eyes because I don't want to see it, right? So that makes me blind,
okay.
right? I'm resistant to, I intentionally, at some level, I may be, again, somewhat, these things get buried in us, and they're, old dynamics. So we have to get them conscious, but,
Okay.
oftentimes we're so afraid of pain, we are doing at least 3 different levels of defense to try to, keep above it, or, never
Yeah.
get it or feel it, And so again, this is part of what the lecture is asking, is how can we be with our pain? How can we not be so terrified of our pain, right? Because we essentially are dissociating out of our lives when we're hurting, and we want to embody, we want to come in, and we want to give resource to the hurting parts, right? And when
Thank you.
yeah. So yeah, and in this way, it's a kind of vicious circle that he's describing here, and it is, like, where we kind of have to keep, being patient also with ourselves, to wake up inside of these things, but I really do believe that the more that we read and see and watch in ourselves, you know, that the as we are bringing the light to our own experiences, that we begin to wake up inside of it. And then he says, you know, true resilient strength and fearless self-assertion rests upon the ability to accept what is and to deal with it without manipulating facts and feelings to be what they are not. You know, and this is where I watch myself, you know, like when I react, I'm immediately going into projection and manipulating facts and feelings. You know, whether I can stop myself, you know, in the moment, or even, you know, after I'm aware, oh, I think I'm reacting, you know, it's another question. But I don't think that I have to carry, you know, a big burden of, oh, I should, you know, be, you know, containing that. You know, it's more important, you know, to keep seeing it and keep recognizing it. And as I do that more and more, I stop, you know, I catch it, right? Or I transform it quicker. And the movement is there. As long as that movement is there, I think we're, you know, I don't know that you can actually control it and then work it. You know, I think you have to let it move through you, come into the light, you know, ask ask forgiveness instead of permission, basically, right? And I think we're all here in a way, sort of in an agreement to do that with each other, right? So the conviction that pain and disappointment must not exist creates a very tight and pointed no movement. The no is not a decided, harmonious, firm strength that grows out of true dignity and self-value. So can you feel the difference between a no that would be that kind of no that comes from decided, harmonious, firm strength growing out of true dignity and self-value? Our other no, our tight no, you know, it's a pseudo strength that comes from the weakness of insisting on having it your own way. This I must have, this I must not have. It's a combative no, it's a demanding no, it's a forcing current, right? You know, the must is there. If you can proceed to the point of view that no experience on earth can come to you that you are not capable of handling, a great deal of tightness will dissipate. Make room for creative movement and also eliminate a lot of fear. So think about that, right? You know, that the ultimate, I mean, it's, again, we have our trauma, right? You know, so it's like if our higher self can align and grasp that, our conscious ego can acknowledge, yeah, that's probably the truth. And, you know, what we have to do is we have to keep bringing that truth down into the places that are traumatized and still living in fear. And sometimes they jump out, and then, you know, we come to, you know, remind them. But I don't know, you know, it's like, this is the truth that we're coming to engrave into our being, you know, into the cells of our body, maybe even into the atoms that inhabit, you know, and are being affected by our life force. You know, everything is interconnected. I think the guide kind of intimates that, you know, the matter that creates our bodies is, you know, is informed by our consciousness and our awareness and our love and our, you know, and so, you know, that, you know, as we're doing this, in a sense, how it feels to me is that we're literally having to embody that truth. And a part of us knows it, and a lot of us doesn't yet. And so we have to just keep reminding and working it and embodying it. And we get it and we lose it and we get it again. We remember, we come back to it. You know, we go through upheaval and then things smooth out, and oh yeah, wasn't I crazy there? Getting all flipped out about that. But over time, I think, you know, that the natural maturation process and experience helps us mellow out, helps us relax a little more. the moment you decide this, the experience you are involved in begins to take on a different aspect. So that's interesting, like to think about that in the midst of that experience, like to bring that thought to the fear somehow, right? If you can to do that, wake up and remember, then what's happening, is kind of like now you can work with it, right? And it takes on a different aspect. And the very act of saying no with a weakness, a tightness, and unhealthiness prevents the creative receptivity. And by the same token, the grabbing, insisting, self-righteous yes quality also prevents receptivity. So both yes and no can be healthy or sick, desirable or undesirable, good or bad. When we know that, there's no experience that can come to us on earth that we're not really capable of handling, see if you can feel your body just melt a little bit, and to relax a little, because that's what he's saying is also like, the no is a tightness, it's a contraction, right? And so in the soul movement, what we want is the receptivity, the openness. And he's saying also our yes can be a tightness, a contraction in self-righteousness and insisting and have to have, right? So he says, desire is determined by the underlying attitude, which in turn determines the nature of the soul currents, which then in turn determines the nature of what we create. Creative receptivity arises out of a soft, relaxed, flowing movement. The pain of taking in something undesired affords you the possibility of transcending this dark point and finding the light behind it. The pain of accepting the absence of something desired affords you the possibility of transcending the emptiness and finding the hidden fullness behind it. This is the law of life. Only when you embrace it do you set the creative movement into action. You must be careful to accept and or renounce in a spirit of trust, however. Doing so in bitterness and hopelessness is again not the right way. Then the harsh soul movement may not be on the surface as it is when a strong pushy forcing current exists, but it is still there, sort of passive aggressive, hidden behind the surface acceptance. Any comments about that?
As we're going through this lecture, I'm sitting here thinking about what it is that on a daily basis, what it is that I fear and seek to avoid. And what comes to mind is chaos. It's like I cannot process chaos well. And my desire is to bring order to everything, and it's just, and it's like an obsessive kind of action that simple things like if I go out for a drive and I need to get somewhere, and there's chaos on the road, it's like I immediately want to find a way that I can get out of that and get some order back in my car, or if there's chaos in my life, in relationships or something like that, it's immediately I want to find a way to bring order to it. And it's not an acceptance, it's more of a forcing current.
Good to see. Yeah. So, and what you're naming, I think, in some other lectures, kind of the keys and the, work with the pathwork, and some of that, there's a teaching that says, that each of the kind of character structures has, or soul types or whatever, has a certain feeling that's the main death, that they can't stand to die emotionally. The guide is saying that we're always defending against a feeling, right? It's just a feeling, but some feelings are so, intense or, so reactivated inside of us that we really don't know how to be with them and ground them. And this, happened early on, again, probably through trauma, right? But it is exactly what he's saying. The way out of it, is to learn to be with that pain. There's a certain pain of chaos. And if you can kind of pay attention when something triggers that to the soul currents, and pay attention to that in you, that's getting triggered, you might be able to kind of just breathe and go through and be with that, right? And learn a little more about how to stand, this feeling, so you don't have to force it away, because it's the defense, right, that says, I can't stand this, I have to make it go away. And that's ultimately
or
not true.
get out of it, or
Get
either
out of
make it
it,
go
right?
away, fix it, bring order to it, or get the hell away from it, which
That
is,
what is it that you have to get out of? That's what you have to feel. That, and what you're feeling is the fear of it and the defense of it and the running from it. So you have not touched the feeling itself. What is underneath the demand to fix it? You have to kind of breathe through and go through that layer of defense, so that you can drop one level deeper into the fear.
why
And
do I fear chaos so much? Is that what you're
it's a feeling. It's not the thought. I mean, it is that, but what you have to do is you have to go feel what chaos feels like inside of you, and breathe it and tolerate it, and, sort of desensitize to it. Because when you were little, it was way too much and you couldn't. But the guide is saying there is no pain that you cannot, stand. If it's in your life, you're okay. So what we have to do is we have to, like, what happened was when we were little, we couldn't. And so we created all of these defenses. But now to heal that and get to the real self, we have to be able to go in and actually be willing to go beneath the defense and feel that feeling. What does chaos feel like inside of you? And to tolerate it and breathe it and transform it, call light to it, not fix it, but kind of go into, through, and out the other side of it. So that, again, you may never love it, but you don't have to fix it. You don't have to get it away. And then you can relax the forcing current. And then your desire can be a healthy one, because I mean, there's a beautiful, healthy desire to, take chaos and put it into order. That's a beautiful thing. The order is a divine principle, right? It's just that when it's in service of the defense, it creates the wrong kind of desire, and then it creates bad results.
Yeah. I get it.
Frank, thank you so much for that example, because it's like I'm trying to figure like this out, like on an everyday level, and what came so clear to me based on your is rejection. Like I can't
And that's one of them too.
I believe I cannot tolerate the feeling of rejection. That comes up a lot in everyday life. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So if I could just feel the pain of what it feels like to be rejected, I probably could be much softer.
It's a kind of, again, trauma truth, but it's not ultimate truth, right? That the feelings are beyond what we can feel. When we first encountered them, they probably were. We didn't have the resources. We couldn't, I mean, we didn't understand it. We didn't know when they would end. We didn't, we couldn't do anything about it. We were pretty helpless, like it was like true traumatic, effect on us, right? But to go to clear that trauma, now we have the resources as adults, as grown-ups, as we can feel, breathe, be with these energies present.
And
to
Darlene, I am one of those reason personality people, so it stands to reason that chaos would just get right in my craw,
Exactly. Of course. And I think that's part of, that's what, one of the lectures talks about. Yeah, it's reason, will, and emotion. And each of those, chaos is one of them, rejection is another. I can't really think of exactly the other one, but helplessness, I think is the third one, so those are the three types of deaths that most of us, like when we distill it all the way down to the core, will come up with one of those feelings, right? And then, yeah, we're defending against them. So then the challenge is, how do we give ourselves support to actually let go of that defense, relax out of that defense, open the block, and dive into the feeling. So creative receptivity arises out of a soft, relaxed, flowing movement. The pain of taking in something undesired affords you the possibility of transcending this dark point and finding the light behind it. So that's also something that happens, like when we can be with the pain of it somehow, often there's a new perspective or some illumination that comes with it, or some understanding that is interesting to me, So the pain of accepting the absence of something desired affords you the possibility of transcending the emptiness and finding the hidden fullness behind it. This is the law of life. Only when you embrace it do you set the creative movement into action. You must be careful to accept and or renounce in a spirit of trust, however. Doing so in bitterness and hopelessness is not the right way. When the harsh soul movement, then the harsh soul movement may be on the surface. Okay, I think I read that. So everything seems to hinge on how you react to pain. Be it the pain of experiencing something or experiencing the lack of it. Can you trust pain as you trust the rest of the universe? As the universe is supposed to be trusted. If you distrust pain, you distrust the universe, for you cannot split off any single existing experience from the rest of creation. Both the movement of yes and the movement of no must become open and sweet. I love that. It's so true and accurate too, when you're talking about, when you're tuning in and actually feeling these soul movements, you can feel this energy, right? Even if the movement is firm, it can still feel sweet. It can be an expression of your trust, or it can be an expression of your fear. It can be an expression of your love, or it can be an expression of your selfishness. All these possibilities determine the nature of your movement, the nature of how you desire, the nature of how you approach painful experience. Your approach to pain immediately and directly determines either creative receptivity and positive desire, or greedy, distorted desire from a fearful rejection of life's pattern. As your meditation grows in the course of your development, turn inward to detect the nature of your soul movements. Determine what they mean, what feeling and attitude they represent, what thought pattern and type of desire they express. As you become more adept in recognizing these soul movements, such recognition will be effortless and quite natural, without deliberately focusing and concentrating. So then we're kind of just in the present, and kind of are present to ourselves as well, reading and sometimes correcting in the moment if we're lucky. This new emphasis doesn't imply that you are beyond your negative. Did you want to say something, Jana?
No, I just laughed at
laughing.
what you said, catch it in the moment. Yeah.
Right. So this new emphasis doesn't imply that you are beyond your negativities, but that you are sufficiently aware of them. The very negativities that still exist will be seen in a new light and in another dynamic expression. For example, you may look into existing resistances and problems contained within your desire. How strong and firm is your desire? Does it flow smoothly, or is it a tight, pushy current? If the latter, what does that mean? What does this way of manifesting your otherwise laudable desire hide? Or is the desire overly weak and even absent? Can you feel a movement of this desire in you? How do you feel it? If the movement is right, there is always confidence and trust that it will come to pass, even if not right this minute. If there is an area in your life where a strong desire has still not been fulfilled, in spite of ardent attempts on your part, investigate how tight this current is. The very tightness may hide an important clue to what you need to know and eliminate before fulfillment can come. Or the tightness of the current may reflect your lack of trust in the universal creative process of which you are a part. And then you must deal with this attitude and see the meaning behind it. So, I mean, that, are you following? I mean, I think this is useful, right? When, again, it's a good example of how to take something and really question it inside of you and question it from being in touch with the inner soul current as you do, right? Does it flow smoothly? Does it feel tight or pushy? You can feel it, and you can sometimes ask, what does this desire, this movement of desire in you mean? It's like, and we can translate, we can begin to make sense out of these energetic expressions within us that I think are the original language. I think in spiritual terms, really, we're translating energy always. That's the original, expression. We're always translating it through our systems, so into our sensory, also into our mental and language, and but we can sit and kind of feel a feeling, and as we're feeling into the feeling as a sensation, it might clarify in terms of what its inner demand is, or what its inner energy is, right? And then we can bring it into words, and we can see what it's saying, right, in a language. So we're translating out of the energy into the language. And this kind of tenseness versus relaxation is a very basic clue and way to work with us. So even in our meditation, we can just go in the morning and scan our body and like, well, where is tightness? Where is holding? Where is openness? Where is flow? How can I breathe into and be with whatever is there without rejection, and just invite it to open and relax and let go of any tension and open into flow. So if to follow through with the important work, we have to be able to tune into the inner movements and to cultivate the ability to concentrate. It's not as difficult as you may think. All it needs is some goodwill and a few minutes exercise daily. And then he says, there's this little section here where he's talking to the people, about some acting out in the center. So, I'm not gonna, and he's talking about, don't you see that acting out refutes self-responsibility as much as total denial does? And you are all ready to assume responsibility for your actions and to choose right action. Humanity as a whole is so deeply conditioned by denial and acting out, with projection and blaming others, that it seems at times impossible for the individual not to do that. Admitting the impulse but not acting on it requires inner prayer, commitment to the truth, and the goodwill to let God within you fill you with the action and knowledge even before the feeling can follow suit. When you act out, you must still believe that you need a scapegoat, and you are still too frightened to look fully at yourself. You are still threatened by what you may see. In the last analysis, the fear is always unjustified, no matter how difficult it may first be to give up cherished illusions about the self. No matter how ugly the traits may be that gradually ooze out of you, they are never the whole truth of who you are. You cannot fail to see objectively the temporary little ego in its ugliness without losing heart about your whole person. You cannot fail to become receptive finally to the beautiful eternal you if you fully commit yourself to seeing and accepting both the good and the bad, the beautiful and the ugly, the divine and the evil. This is a very important piece. This is true humility. If we can unite inside of ourselves in this way, then we can really be grounded human beings. We can, embody, our humanity and embody our divinity and do this work, in a way that is unobstructed, compared to sort of where the ego usually leaves us. And it is a kind of process of slipping the bonds of the ego. Doesn't mean that we're done with the work, but it becomes a lot easier when we can, kind of clear a lot of these ego obstructions that we have. If people are interested, I think the Gospel of Mary Magdalene really kind of speaks to this. It speaks in Christian language, so it's a little bit harder sometimes to follow, but there's some good books kind of are interpreting it and helping. And I see a lot of correspondence here and a good guide in that too. So you cannot fail to become receptive finally to the beautiful eternal you if you fully commit yourself to seeing and accepting both the good and the bad, the beautiful and the ugly, the divine and the evil. If you wish to own up to both, you will find both. You will come to see that the good is real and eternal, while the bad is only a temporary aberration and not the final you. You must make up your mind to take in all of yourself, for better or for worse, whatever that may mean. You must ask for guidance, to do so with a constructive and realistic attitude that leaves room for many possibilities and never denies life. If you so ask, this attitude will come to you from within. Begin to focus on both the ugliness and the beauty. See that the very fact that you own up to the ugliness comes from the beauty. For only the divine infiltration of the self makes the self capable of even wanting to be in truth, of having the courage to do so, of undertaking the wondrous journey into the inner world and learning the many difficult lessons. The very act of revealing all parts of the self deserves your greatest self-respect, which you can pay when you stop projecting the unacceptable on others or using the ugliness of others to hide your own. I suggest that you also help each other. When you are very tempted to accuse the other person, ask yourself, what is ugly in me and what is ugly in him or her? And then ask, what is beautiful in me and what is beautiful in him or her? But really mean these questions. Leave the questions open and wait for the answers until you are receptive enough for them to reveal themselves to you. Do not merely mouth such questions while you want to condemn others and yourself. Find negative pleasure in doing so. So this judgment is really the key, even in Mary Magdalene's gospel, right? And it's like it's the recognition that there's nothing to judge here, right? And stepping outside of the temptation to go into judgment that sets us free. So leave the questions open and wait for the answers until you are receptive enough for them to reveal themselves to you. Do not merely mouth such questions while you want to condemn others and yourself and find negative pleasure in doing so. Admit that you do not want to see the good either in the other or in yourself. Being right is really no substitute for seeing yourself as good, And oftentimes, we kind of fight for being right more than and if we really do acknowledge and see the good in us, right, if we are activating that good in us, that feels a whole lot better than being right. And that's what he's saying there, and that's so true. So, but if you have worked your way through the mazes of your crust to where you can already genuinely want to know both sides, then you will soon witness the unitive principle unfold in you. You will discover what you now know in theory, but still cannot practice, as is evident in your everyday acting out when you get involved with others negatively. What I see happening is that even if you no longer blame others and exonerate yourself, even if you admit your own negativity, you often do so because this is how it is supposed to be now. But you do not emotionally experience this. Emotionally, you still want to have a stake in blaming others and exonerating yourself. This always means that inwardly you totally blame yourself, but do not wish to see this self-blaming behavior. The more you blame yourself, the more you are hooked on blaming, and the greater your investment in doing so must be. In that battle, it is always either the other person or you who is right. So this is really useful, I think, if you find yourself in an argument with somebody in a right, wrong, in a, kind of battle, to kind of work through this in this way a little bit and explore it from this kind of lens and diamond angle. As you ask to recognize the good and the bad in you and in the other person.
And
open.
Darlene,
Yeah, go ahead, Jacob.
can you go back to that for a moment? The more you, I'll go down a little bit, the more you blame yourself, the more you are hooked on blaming, and the greater your investment in doing so must be. That battle, it is always either the other person or you who is right. So I'm trying to picture what it looks like day to day. I'm trying to think about times that I am hooked on blaming because I'm blaming myself. Do you
Yeah.
understand that subtlety of it?
Yeah, it's like it is a little different of an angle. I mean, it's like, so let's maybe thinking of most of the time when, we're in an argument. I think what the guide is saying is that it's our own internal split. And so our partner or the other person, the boss, the whoever that we're in the argument with, actually is representing, some kind of our shadow side, right? And we're trying to control our shadow side. and yet deeply, really, it is where, like maybe it's some part of our insecurity, or maybe we have our own self-judgment in certain things, and so we're trying to be perfect, and then we have them live up to that standard too, kind of thing. So usually I don't think they can be separated, right? Where we are self-judging, we judge others. Where we're judging others, we are self-judging. Judgment in itself is just fundamentally this, kind of sin, this missing the mark. And it, takes us into this, usually this battle of who is right and who is wrong.
This is saying blaming. So because I can see somebody else's lower parts and I may not judge them from a place of should. I may just be able to discern, muddy water versus clean and clear water, right? I don't have to judge that
Do
one
you
as
want to
better.
control it in any way? Do you want to change it? Do you want to?
Yeah, I do. Yes. Yeah, I would say that in those moments, yes, it's a desire to change or push back or challenge that aspect of the person.
Right. And so that may not exactly be blaming, and maybe it's, like, but it could be useful to look at, like how is that some, part of your own dynamic with yourself. But I think it's like, there's clearly the defense there, right? And so you need to see, like, well, what death do you have to die if you don't have your forcing current, if you stand down, if you let go of your position?
Right. No, I think I get that part. I'm just trying to understand
See how it is there. Well, I
the,
don't know
the,
exactly if you're
you
blaming.
have to blame
I
yourself.
think he also is saying that self-blaming is such a painful state to be in that you almost like automatically seek a way to you know relieve that pain by putting the blame somewhere else, on someone else or with something else. Self-blaming is a very painful place to be. Don't want to hang out there too long, you know. So
Yeah,
Exactly.
I hear you, Frank. Is this towards that, this always means that inwardly you totally blame yourself, but do not wish to see the self-blaming behaviors. That totally
I don't
part?
know that you all are always in that state of self-blaming. I think that when you are in the state of self-blaming, you're almost immediately
Hooked on blaming others.
seek to blame someone else or something else, so that you can get out of that painful state of self-blaming. I'm telling you that I've been there. It's a painful place to be.
Right. So what we're saying is that because I am attacking, blaming myself totally, like I'm not seeing the high parts of myself and low parts. I am simply attacking the low parts of myself. That is too uncomfortable and a crushing state that we try to get away from by giving the blame to others.
Yeah.
Is that what we're saying here?
Yeah.
I think that's it. Does that connect for
Yeah,
you?
that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, I would say that.
Yeah, so Jacob, so how how I'm trying to embody it is, it's like I'm thinking to myself, well, if I have created, or if there's been a conflict with another coworker, and if I have fear of rejection, I right away, consciously or unconsciously, feel that it was my fault that it's because I am rejectable. I blame myself for the conflict, but I also blame the other for making me feel rejected. Right? Does that make any sense? Like, that's how I can internalize. I say, oh, okay, because it's so painful for me to feel rejected, I have to blame the other for causing me to
Mm,
have the pain.
I believe I can see that too. That angle of it. Yeah.
And
So
rejecting
it's like the mind of the maze, right? The mind is a maze, and I think that once you see it, you can unhook yourself.
yeah.
You
And
know,
rejecting yourself is like a sin against your soul.
Yeah.
Doesn't it feel that way to you when you're rejecting yourself?
oh, absolutely. Oh,
So
it's dark.
how,
It's a
how long can
dark
you hang
place.
out and how long can you hang out there, Janie?
Well, I at some point I do turn to prayer, and I do need to ask for help, because it's very dark
Yeah,
to be in that place. Yeah.
yeah.
And
I think,
isolated and alone.
and again, these things get triggered, and to me, like, like life, why did that happen? Life needed me to feel this, right? It
Yeah.
needed to come up in my experience, and then now I'm aware, can I not fall into and kind of identify with it and get lost in it? I mean, even if I do that, I'm still, working it, but it helps, like, it's easier if, we can, recognize the pain body is here, and then pray, like you said, right? It's kind of like, okay, so, here's this, very dark place. And, oftentimes, it is about self-forgiveness, because there is some kind of self-blame, self-judgment, right? So I find, like, the Ho'oponopono prayer, and that can be for both parties in it, or, whatever, like, can be a good prayer. as well, or the Our Father, right? Forgive us as we forgive
Yeah.
each other, right? So it's kind of like there's this, deep way, I think, that we have to take that responsibility. And then sometimes they are very dark, and we don't, we can't just say, well, poof, and you're gone, right? Like we're saying, here I am, God, you know, I know this is not all of me, but this is kind of what I'm covered by right now. I'm asking for support, for help, for, illumination, for, purify. Like a lot of times when I sit and hold those dark spaces as the soul currents, I feel them literally leaving up through my body and going into the light, the darkness, right? The tension, the sharpie parts like that, and so that's a lot of times, my meditation is to just to sit and notice, is there anything in me that got stuck, or, is feeling not so good, and then just giving it space to expand and lift out of me.
I am so glad that I joined the group tonight, because like there is like a concept, the God will often say, look at the common denominator, right? So sometimes when I'm at work and I'm having a reoccurring situation that comes up, and Frank and Jacob, like I say, oh my God, like I'm recognizing the same feeling over, and so it must be something inside of me that this keeps, but I don't know what it is yet at that point, but now tonight I'm like, okay, it's clearly the fear of rejection that I'm piecing together tonight, so maybe next time it happens, I'll be able to say, oh, okay, this is what we talked about. This is the rejection. I'm afraid of being rejected. So, hopefully organically, I will be able to start to evolve a little bit more, and not get so entangled. Because when you see it as a pattern, it's like, oh no, it's like I want to blame the other, but then when I see it as a pattern, I'm like, oh man, this must be something inside of me that I'm blinded to in the moment,
And there's a way, it's like whatever it is, it's the guide says, it's just, it's lost in separation
Yeah.
somehow,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And it's not really you. You are the one that's always forever connected. So if you can remember, that, and hold this place that's lost in separation, and remind it, right? Or, like you're saying, it's this, place of rejection, self-rejection, right? And there's a kind of truth, probably from the divine, that, how could you ever be rejected? God sees you as perfect. You're always welcome, you're always accepted, nothing could ever reject you. You're divine and whole just as you are, right? And to kind of receive the truth, because these images and these fears and all of this other stuff we have, the guide is very famous for asking us to ask, what is the truth? Right? So we think, oh, I'm rejected, or, oh, I mean, it's good to recognize that the feeling comes from there, and then, maybe you can ask, is that the truth? And maybe, am I rejecting myself? Or, there's just a place to hold that in the light. I have one of my hymns that says, I am the instrument of the love inside of me, right? So, and then everything that isn't love, like my pain of rejection, the pain of feeling rejected, that's a part inside of me that is lost from love, and it's suffering in that place. And we can awaken our compassion for it because we came here, to help it and set it free. So
Yeah.
being this, when we can identify with being the instrument of love, and then the pain inside of us is what we are here, it's not a problem. It's meant to be here with us. We welcome it. We brought it here. We are the light that can help it find its way home.
Yeah, and it's almost like joining Pathwork is the vehicle, like, I mean, to back up what you're saying, right? It's
Yeah.
like, I never thought, oh, I'm going to join Pathwork. It's like I was guided here to heal that
To
soul
learn that
journey.
that's who you are.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah,
And to replace all of these misconceptions that,
Yeah.
we've been given through our culture and our parents and our lives and
Yeah.
past lives and that.
Yeah. And you weren't rejected when you chose to reincarnate. Your spirit guides and angels didn't say, sorry, you're not ready yet.
Yeah.
They said, yeah.
Yeah, I was saying that. I was saying I'm not ready yet to let go of it.
Back up there in the spirit world, huh?
Yeah.
Right. Exactly.
Hey, I gotta go, you guys. It was great to
Okay.
be with you all.
Bye,
I
Jacob.
hope you have a
It was
good night, and
Night,
looking
Jacob.
forward to next time.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.
So I think we're coming to the close too. So, and he's going on a little further about this topic of blaming. So let's see what else he adds in here. He says, you desire to blame because you do not desire to see yourself. Such unhealthy, distorted desire, contrary to the truth of being, creates a constant threat that the untruthful, the unrealistic will sooner or later be exposed. This is the mask part, right? And we are afraid that we're not okay, and so we want to project a false thing, and then eventually it's, we're, even if they love us, we're afraid we're going to be exposed. We can't have true intimacy, true connection from that place. And he says, therefore, a protective defensive tightness is put into both desires, I guess both desires being to blame oneself or blame the other, I don't know. Oh, healthy desire.
Right.
Anyway, let me go on. So the tightness influences the soul current. He says, approach the current of these desires, feel it as you feel the tight, strenuous current of the need to blame. Experience and observe this drama truly as an observer. You will then become intensely aware of the soul movement that is created by your desire to blame. And this is kind of, useful for me. I hope to go back to this, like when I get triggered, in my place of, it's not fair, you guys, like I blame the institutions for poor customer service, right? And then I blame the people that are not helping me. So,
Well, and also maybe at the root of all of this blaming is our addiction to victimhood,
mhm, yeah. And helplessness, right? It's like that's my death. I can't stand to feel helpless, right? And so if somebody can't fix it for me and I feel helpless, I'm going to try to murder them instead, right? It's like-
Right.
so yeah, so we're hitting all of these, like we can't stand feelings. So he says, take full responsibility for the desire to blame. Open your heart in a relaxed way to welcome the desire not to blame. In doing so, you can see truth in you and in the other. Seeing truth never leads to blame. When you blame, you are never in truth, even if what you see is partially true. Very important there, right? The others may actually do and be all the negative things you attribute to them, but they cannot be totally bad. For if they were, you would not blame. The same applies to you. I'm not quite sure I follow that sentence there, but anyway, yeah, I mean, I do follow up until then, you know, that you know, it's like we can discern other stuff, right? But again, we're not a victim, and it doesn't, you know, it's not about blaming them, you know, we're experiencing that, you know, in some co-creation that, you know, we chose and is useful for us in some way, right? You know, so even if everything is, you know, true what we're seeing, and they have their part in the dynamic, you know, pointing a finger is still not looking at our own responsibility, and we can, you know, see their responsibility and see ours without pointing fingers at either ourselves or the other, right?
Yeah, and in a crowd, there's always that one person, right? That when you'll have this magnitude with that they blame you, you know, it's a
Right,
blame game, right?
right.
Um,
The moment, let's see, where does this start? Seeing truth does not mean that either you or the other will be totally exonerated of all negativity, but a truthful understanding of the negativity is possible only when you are totally engaged in and committed to seeing yourself truthfully. The moment you do so, all guilt, self-rejection, and self-blame disappear.
mm,
So when we're truly willing to see ourselves, you know, and what that requires is true humility. What that requires is dropping the mask. What that requires is not being self-blaming, you know, because like, you know, you were saying, Frank, you know, like that, we cannot stand to be in that place of self-blaming ourselves, right? It takes us right to defense. And it's like, it's not useful, you know, why are you blaming yourself? You know, there's this kind of whole, that's that, you know, projected, created evil that is not even us that's attacking us, right? You know, it's the idealized self-image, it's the uh, superimposed conscience, the critic, you know, the part that we've turned into God and given, you know, and told, you know, think that it's, you know, it's in truth, and you know, we should listen and obey its attempts to control us, but it never works that way. All defense. So seeing truthfully may elicit anger, but never blame. And that is very different. Become attuned to this very special difference. Also, when you truly desire truth, you can wait for the truth to reveal itself. You can wait in a state of flexible desire, in a stream of soft, trustful waiting. And I've seen this in action too, you know, like instead of reacting, if I can just hold a space and wait, you know, like all of a sudden things will get clearer. I see what's really going on, or like that. So it's a very useful kind of grounded place to be in that stream of soft, trustful waiting for the truth to reveal itself as a gift from your innermost being. For when it comes, it will feel like a gift. It is so revealing, so conciliating. It sets you free in all ways. You may experience pain, but the nature of the pain is very different from the pain that comes from the cramped space within you. Once you enter into this process, your desire can make room for the visualization and creation of a new state. Desire and receptivity, totally free from any must, do not refer to an expectation of external forces. Rather, I am referring to an inner creative process of suddenly seeing reality in a new and sharper light. This sharp light is the grace of truth and love that is freeing and yet safe. So I say, my dearest friends, create a new desire for a new inner state in which you let go of all musts. You can easily feel every must as a very definitive movement in you, and every must defeats healthy desire, therefore not allowing fulfillment. For a short period, under certain circumstances, the must may appear to yield results. This is the temptation. However, the results are not only short-lived, but usually lead to a crash, to a severe disappointment, whose origin cannot be pinpointed, which is the worst part about it. The ability to tune into the soul currents of desire, right and wrong, healthy and distorted, relaxed and creative, or tight and uncreative, is a focus you need to concentrate on very specifically to expand into new states of consciousness and experience. As you learn to do so, the rewards will be like flowers blossoming within you. The love of the universe is in every cell of your being, in every particle of your psychic processes. Try to know and feel this. Try to tune into this. As you grow on this path, my dearest ones, you will increasingly learn to concentrate and use energy in certain directions. This will come out of the organic process of your purification and will not be a superimposed attempt to direct energy willfully. You can entrust yourself to this organic process from the core of your being. Listen to it, become receptive to it. You are all blessed and loved. So I like that lecture myself. Anybody else want to make any final comments before we wrap it up?
Yeah, I thought it was a good lecture too, and I'm glad we got to the heart of some of our personal matters concerning our desires and fears and forcing currents and whatnots, all of that stuff that came up.
Right.
It was, I mean, we kind of brought it to life. Instead, it didn't hang out there in the intellectual zone.
Yeah.
Yep. Thank you for, all your sharing and contributions and willingness to, share this stuff and, on recordings and that kind of thing, because we hide so much of this. We feel so personal about it sometimes, that, it's like, I think the light of the pathwork doesn't get shared very well. And
Yeah.
so every time we can record some of our work in the pathwork and our sharing about it, I think it's a great value to the world. So thank you, buddy.
Thank you so much. Like, I got a lot out of it tonight, and yeah.
Okay. So
Darlene.
Yep.
Good
See you
night,
next
Jane.
time. Bye,
Okay.
Frank. Good night. Good night, Darlene.
Good night.
Bye-bye.
Bye.